What's up, guys? Welcome back to Fame Ready, the podcast to show you that anything is possible. Yes, including fame. I'm your host, top personal branding and public relations expert, Katrina Owens. Welcome. Today is going to be a bit of a fun episode because I have had the pleasure of watching so many of my clients land top podcast interview slots over the last couple weeks. And that's something to freaking celebrate, shout from the rooftops. But I know there's so many of you out there who want to be featured and speaking on top podcasts. So what I would love is to just kind of dive into what that process actually looks like, mistakes you could be making, things you should be considering. And this is really going to be like the juice on how you can start landing the more significant shows that are going to support your growth as a personal brand. Because, one of the things that I've said as an entrepreneur, as a PR expert supporting so many clients, I always say there's a podcast for every type of person. So if you're someone who wants to start guesting on more podcasts, if that's a way that you really want to grow your business, there are podcasts out there for you right now that would happily have you as a guest. But here's the caveat. As your brand grows, as you gain more awareness, more authority, your platform maybe takes your business to another level, that means you need to start aspiring to a different level of podcast. And that means you don't necessarily need to be in all the places all the time. You simply just need to target the podcasts that have your ideal client as part of their target demo and are really going to move the needle on your current place in business. Because while there's a podcast out there for every single one of you, not all podcasts are created equal. Obviously, there's some that have really large audiences. There's some that are hosted by celebrities. There are some that, get the same kind of sponsorship that like a television show does at this point. So this podcast, so meta, this podcast episode today is to tell you all about how to start pitching yourself to these bigger and better shows as your brand platform grows. So the case study that I think is going to be a really great one to bring to the forefront is telling you a little bit about one of my one-on-one clients who has seen great success pitching herself to top podcasts. The reason why I had the idea for this episode is because she messaged me this morning to let me know that she's secured an interview on a top 1% podcast and a top 0.5% podcast. So both of those are significant. Okay. There's this global ranking scale that basically tells you where does your podcast fall in terms of all of the podcasts in the world. Where does it rank when it comes to listenership, subscribership, followers, all of that? So to be in the top 1% is significant. To be in the top 0.5% is even more significant. And so, just to give you a bit of a comparison, Fame Ready is in the top 10% of podcasts globally. And I have obviously full faith that we're going to continue to rise through the ranks. But that's your little comparison if you're unfamiliar with that. With that ranking system. And what I typically have my clients do, if you're a part of the Fame Ready Entrepreneur Program, which is my group coaching program, or if you become a one on one client, I get you really good at knowing how to assess whether a podcast is right for you. So, for this client that messaged me this morning to let me know about all of her wins, she is someone who has over 100,000 followers on Instagram. She has a significant following on TikTok, and she is rising through the ranks herself. It's been really cool to watch because she had a very stale social media following that hadn't increased, hadn't moved in years when her and I started to work together in the summer. And once she became a one on one client, the very first thing we worked on was getting her very, very comfortable showing up as herself, not trying to edit down her her voice or her thoughts into these like perfect little sound bites, not trying to like over aesthetic everything. She just started showing up authentically, like her, with her knowledge, what she's good at, and she's gone viral. She has, she continues to see such an amazing increase in her platform month over month, and I could not be more proud. So with that comes an increase in PR opportunities, and getting the opportunity to pitch yourself to bigger and bigger shows, knowing that that's available to you, is obviously part of it. So what's really interesting about this client in particular is a couple months ago, she actually came to me and she said, "Hey, Katrina, some women in my network are using platforms like Podmatch and Matchmaker.fm, and there's a couple others that come to mind, but there's websites out there that you can use to like not mass pitch yourself, but I guess have access to many different podcasts to pitch yourself to, and all of that." So, what I say to each and every client who's interested in a particular opportunity like that is, if you're going to pay for a platform like Podmatch or Matchmaker.fm, because they're all pay to play, I would highly suggest you like invest in that platform for 3 months and really dedicate yourself to like pitching as much as you can using those platforms, exhaust the whole thing, and then stop. But there's a certain type of client that I recommend that strategy for. That is for the type of client or the type of personal brand more widely. If you're listening to this and thinking that could be the strategy for you, that's the strategy for you if you don't have a lot of podcasting experience to begin with. Maybe you don't have any. You want to increase your visibility. You also want to increase your experience speaking. Okay. In my first year of really like running a personal brand based business. So not this year. I consider that to be like kind of the 2024 Katrina. I guested on a ton of podcasts that year. And the whole goal of that was to like build up the experience, to get lots and lots of content of me speaking and sharing my insights in different ways. It also helped me build up my network because I got to connect to a lot of people who were interested in maybe collaborating with me on workshops, or maybe we like did, I don't know, like email list swaps, things like that. So if you're just starting out, pitching yourself to a high volume of podcasts is a really great strategy. If you're a little bit more experienced, if you have an established social media platform, if you have a significant amount of followers, you do not need to be everywhere. Okay. This is a strategy I do really, really well. I am not everywhere. I am where I believe is going to be most impactful for my business. That means I don't just like stick to one type of event. That means I don't just go to events here locally. Like I am constantly looking for opportunities to expand my brand awareness and brand authority. And the same goes for podcasting. I actually don't pitch myself to podcasts at all anymore, just because I feel like I've built up that experience. I really enjoyed going on podcasts for a while, but the podcast I want to do now, I mean, when I do record them, it's because someone that is in my existing network, that I have an existing relationship with, might invite me on. So that's great. I'll always do that. If you are a connection of mine and you are someone who is interested in me in having me as a guest, all you have to do is ask and I will make the time. Um, if a really big show reached out to me, I would also do that. But I just don't feel the need right now, based on the PR strategy that I have in place and all of that. I don't feel the need to be doing a lot of guesting. So, but that could change, right? Because as my platform grows, I will have the opportunity to go on larger and larger shows. And if that becomes the case, then I probably will spend more time pitching, because now I've moved into a different category of podcast. With the following that I have right now, the podcasts that are available to me, I need to spend a little bit more time growing my follower count and my platform to really be able to access some of these bigger opportunities. So that gives you some context about where my client's at because her platform has grown so much. So she has these amazing opportunities to start pitching herself to bigger and bigger shows. So that's what we've been doing. So as a one-on-one client, so she is in my one-on-one publicity coaching program. So that is about a 4-month, well, her and I worked together for my full 6-month program. So in that, we worked on her personal brand foundation, got her really comfortable showing up on social media first. And then we transitioned over into more traditional PR coaching, which is when my team created her media list for her. I helped her pitch. I helped her learn to pitch. I helped her to understand that process. And now I want you to understand what that process looks like. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into that. So we talked a little bit about the types of shows that we suggested she pitch herself to. So in my one-on-one program, my team actually like custom curates a list for her. So we have all these different platforms that we pay to use. So we're doing our own research to see like what shows would be good, based on follower count, based on platform size. I love the website Listen Notes, which is where you can search every single podcast and find out what that global ranking is. That is the first statistic I check anytime someone mentions a podcast to me. So we made sure that her list was really focused on these like top 1% or less globally ranked podcasts. The other platform that we use internally is called Raphonic. It is like super old school, honestly. Like the platform looks like it hasn't been updated in years, but the information on it is really good. The problem with podcasting is the analytics that you might use some of these platforms for to like find out more information on a show, they're never going to be super accurate because podcast analytics are super private. So it's not like there's a public database where you can like go and like get all of the inside scoop on any show. But Listen Notes is great just to like kind of judge by global ranking where it sits. And then Raphonic provides a bit more details. They tend to be not super accurate, but again, it's all ballpark. So, and I mean, so much of PR is, right? Like when we think about lifestyle publications, like if you're pitching yourself to magazines, like it's all an experiment to see what works for you. But obviously, as your personal brand evolves, you must be more choosy about the types of opportunities that you go after. So, using Listen Notes in a platform like Raphonic really allows you to kind of gauge, like, okay, is this the right show for me? If your platform is smaller, like if you say have less than 1,000 followers, there's a different strategy for you. And maybe I think it would be best if I just do a separate episode on like podcasting for beginners. Podcasting for beginners is also something that we talk a lot about in the Fame Ready Entrepreneur Program. Lots of the business owners that join that program, which I will link in the show notes, have never been on a podcast before, but my program teaches you how to do it. And all of them have started to make guesting on podcasts a big part of their visibility strategy, which is cool to see. So, this episode, I really want to make sure we're focusing on how to land on top podcasts. So, and this is great. Like a lot of these practices or like best practices can really be used across the board because obviously, like, I think we should treat every single opportunity like it's a big, juicy, sparkly opportunity. So you can really like kind of, even if you're not quite at a place where you think you could be on a top 1% podcast yet, this strategy is what will definitely work for podcasts that are more accessible. And as you grow, because you will grow, there will be a day when you're ready to go on that top 1% podcast, then you'll want to have this knowledge too. So back to my client, we created this media list where we outlined like these 30 different contacts. So for her, we did a split between like traditional media because she hosts some events. We did podcasts. We also did like events that she could pitch to either like speak at or exhibit at, that sort of thing. So her pitching process. I am very particular when it comes to pitching because I never want it to feel like a volume game. If you have any semblance of a personal brand, you probably get these emails from, I don't know, they look so spammy, but they're publicists or agencies in some aspect that tell you that they can get you on top podcasts or they can get you on more podcasts or whatever the goal is, whatever they're trying to sell you. They want to get you on podcasts generally. And please do not use these businesses. Please do not invest your time and hard-earned money in using these businesses. Okay. I want to make sure that you are building the skill set within yourself so you can use discernment, so you can know that these kind of scammy businesses that are reaching out to you, they're not it. Because on any given day, I have podcast pitches landing in my own inbox, people pitching their clients to be on Fame Ready, and they're terrible. They are terrible because they look like they've been mass produced. Okay. So the pitching process that I use, it takes time. I'm not here. I will never do a podcast episode that's like, here's how you can pitch 30 podcasts in 10 minutes, because that's not realistic. It's going to take you more than 10 minutes to write your first podcast pitch to a big show. Sorry, it is. But if you want to get on top shows, if you want to really create this personal brand that's authoritative and elevated and, attracts high quality opportunities, you've got to be willing to do high quality work. So the exercise that each and every one of my clients has to do is, if there is a top podcast that you want to be on, first you must listen to an episode, maybe not just one, maybe several, and pick the episodes that feel like they're kind of in line with like what your business does or what you would talk about. So for example, if there was a top podcast that I wanted to go on, I would look through their episodes and I would say like, okay, where are some episodes where they talk about visibility or speaking gigs or personal branding? And I would try to find those episodes first, because it's really important to know if a podcast has covered what you've spoken about before. Okay. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but it's important information to have because it's going to dictate how you craft your pitch. So for my client, she has a particular set of expertise in the wellness space. So when she was looking through all of the episodes for the top podcast we recommended she pitch herself to, she was looking for experts that have kind of talked about her niche area of expertise on these episodes. She did a really great job of listening to not just one episode, but she would listen to a couple, and she would kind of get a feel for like what the conversations were about, what topics were covered, what opinions were had. And that's what gave her the background knowledge to write a really good pitch, because that enabled her to write a pitch that not only references what the show is about, it actually goes deep into the content and lets her actually articulate her own opinion. Okay. So this is where these podcast agencies have tried to get a little bit more sneaky with it. So I'll get these podcast pitches that are like, hey, Katrina, loved your latest episode all about mastering your next speaking gig. And I was like, okay, well, you've just regurgitated the title to me. So they're making it sound like maybe they've listened, but obviously they haven't, because they haven't actually been able to tell me what's in the episode. So for my client, she took the time to like really listen to like, okay, what was talked about? What did they cover? What opinions did I disagree with? What do I have an alternative take on? She got into the nitty gritty. And this is what I tell every single person that works with me. It's like, listen to what other people have to say about your industry. And you're just going to become a stronger personal brand with more interesting opinions. So take the time. So her understanding what was actually talked about on the show allows her to craft a stronger pitch, because then she can not only just say like, hey, loved your latest show on menopause, for example. She can actually say, hey, I listened to this episode with this particular guest. There was a conversation about X, Y, and Z, and here's why I simply disagree. And this would make a really great conversation for an upcoming episode, because we can get more into maybe this side of things that you didn't really touch on. So do you see how you can start to go like even more in depth into like talking about what that looks like? Um so that's what she did. So she would send an email pitch that basically kind of covered the bases on that. But she didn't just send an email pitch. My instructions to her were, send an email pitch, and then within 24 to 48 hours, you are sending a follow-up voice note via direct message on Instagram. And this is important because this is where you're going to be able to make contact with the actual host. So you never know what happens to an email. Emails can go unread, they can go in the spam folder. People that have big podcasts, like they get so many freaking emails every single day. So just because you send a really good pitch and it doesn't get answered doesn't mean it's because your pitch was bad. Maybe no one saw it. So what I have all my clients do is follow up via DM. So it's following that person on Instagram and then sending a voice note that says, "Hey Susie, just wanted to send you a quick note because I actually just sent you some details around why I think I could bring some expertise to your podcast. So I wanted to make sure we were connected here so you could learn a little bit about me and what I stand for. And let me know if you have any questions. I would love to be considered as a guest, and I'll talk to you soon." It's that short. Do not let that voice note be more than 1 minute long. Ideally, it's 30 seconds. It's just to bring their attention to you. Okay. And this was especially important for my client because of her platform size. I wanted these podcasts to see that she had a substantial following. And I wanted them to like maybe go to her media kit and actually see her incredible statistics. Not all of that can be conveyed in an email, right? So I really wanted to make sure people were getting eyes on her platform. And clearly it worked because she is booked. So she sent me two like updates today. And then like last week, she had told me about another one that she had pitched herself to. So she's landing really big shows using that process, which is same goes for all of my clients, really. But this is the one that's top of mind right now because the other important thing to remember is seasonality. So, right now I'm recording this, it's about mid November. So, two very interesting things can happen in PR at this time of year. You either have the podcasts or the publications, the events that decide, okay, we are heading into the holiday season, we're going to pause. And so they might not respond to pitches. They might not be even doing any scheduling. They are now just like banking everything until 2026 or the new year. Okay. So if you're pitching at this time of year, just keep that in mind. If you don't receive a response or if people are brushing you off, it might just be because this is not something that they're working on right now. The alternative, and this is what my client is seeing, and this is why I wanted to bring this to the surface too, is what's really cool about the results that she's seeing is, she did get to be fully transparent. There were a couple of responses where people were like, "We're all booked for 2025. We're going to open up our books for guests in 2026. So we can chat again then." So she's had obviously some really great responses, people that are booking her now. She's still doing some of these podcast interviews into December. And that's a really interesting time of year because this is when people kind of wind down, right? So by her kind of getting brushed off by some of these shows that are waiting, she's still pitching. She's not letting it discourage her. And look, it's landing her really big opportunities. So um, that's because some shows are actually like, yeah, it's quiet. This is allowing me as a host to actually sift through um, pitches and see like who's coming in and be more intentional. So my client is very well pitching at like a more quiet time of year, which just increases her chances of landing an opportunity, right? So if you have the capacity at this time of year to continue pitching, I would 100% continue to do so because the opportunities are still out there. For any of the shows that kind of brushed her off and were like, "We're not taking on any more guests for 2025," I simply said to her, just log all of it. Like we track everything in a media list. So it's all tracked to see like when she reached out, when she followed up, what the result was, all of that. And so I said to her, just log that and then put a note in your calendar towards the end of January that basically says like podcast follow-ups. And that's when you can like follow up with some of these shows that kind of like pushed it off and see if now is a better time to schedule an opportunity. But what I loved, because the worst thing that you can get to a pitch is a non-response. Okay. That's the worst thing. I actually love a rejection or I love like a not now because the door is still open. So if you get like a not now, it's really important to know that that wasn't a no. And you better log that and pop yourself a little note for future you to reach back out because there's still an opportunity there. A rejection. So this is something else my client did actually get this too, where one podcast was like, we've covered this topic a lot. I like admire the work that you do. I think it's so important, but we're just looking to kind of expand in a different direction for the next season or the next year. And that's good information to have too, right? I think from that we were like, okay, next time it's just like maybe leaning even more into the differentiation, or sometimes it's just not always going to be a yes, and that's the important part to remember about PR too. It's not always going to be a yes, and that's okay. That's not every opportunity is for us, and like, do we really want every opportunity to be for us? I think that would be exhausting. So that's what that process looks like. Now, I want to just run you through a couple quick do's and don'ts, because while that process is in place and it's great, um, there's nuance. Like everything, there's nuance. And this is why coaching really is important, because when my clients are working on pitching and doing this kind of thing, um, there's always gray area. There's always cases where it's like, mm, yes, except, or, um, this situation is slightly different because, like, PR, marketing, personal branding, like there is no right or wrong, black or white answer, like ever. So that's why it's important to work with a professional who can help you receive the results that you really want. So obviously, the do's, I really want you to make sure you are always following up. So my client knows that when she sends an email pitch and that voice note follow up, she is going to follow up again via email in 7 days. And there is a whole formula to what that new follow up needs to look like. And actually, what I'll do is you can grab my pitch kit, which actually gives you access to pitch templates, real examples, subject lines. I'm going to link that in the show notes as well, because people always struggle on the follow up because we think it's like a corporate follow up where we're like, just circling back on my last message. Do not say that. Okay. There's a reason why your first one didn't go answered. So you need to craft, it's almost a brand new pitch. It's a brand new pitch, but you're still acknowledging the fact that this isn't your first time reaching out. So that's why, if this is something you're really focused on for 2026, you're going to want to grab the pitch kit, because this is going to help you get really good at this process. So make sure that you're following up within 7 days if you don't hear anything. Okay. The next thing that I don't want you to do is, I don't want you to pitch without having done your research. Obviously, we just talked earlier in this episode about what that research looks like, listening to episodes, understanding the content. But here's the most important thing of all. Not every podcast accepts guests. Mine doesn't. I might do like some guest episodes in the future. It's something that I'm considering, just because I think there's some like really cool conversations that could be had that pertain to personal branding and public relations. My problem is I love recording this like with a studio vibe. So like I just don't love the Zoom podcast aesthetic. Like I just don't. So I either have to get over that or just maybe do like a whole onslaught of like in-person podcast episodes, which would also be really cool. Yeah, that would be really cool, actually. Maybe I got to put that in my 2026 plan. Yeah. So here's the thing, I get a ton of podcast pitches, but I'm like, clearly you don't care enough to actually like look into my podcast and notice that there's only ever been one guest, and it's Heather, a team member. Okay. And that's because we did it in person. But it was also because there's obviously a strategy there. And it was a bit of an experiment. Like I wanted to experiment and having like a guest. And obviously Heather has lots of grace for me and my antics. So it was easy for her and I to just kind of like experiment and see if it was gonna work. It was a bit of a shit show, based with the dog, the camera, the tech. It was a whole thing. So I'm hoping I'll be able to like kind of put that back on the docket for the new year. But up until then, you should not be sending me preemptive guest episode pitches because you have no idea what it looks like to be a guest on this podcast. I was actually really put off, honestly, a couple weeks ago because I went to an event and I met some really lovely people at this event. Met a lovely woman who didn't follow me after, by the way. Not saying that that's like a must do, but based on what she proceeded to send me in my DMs, yes, you should be following me on Instagram if that's what you're going to request. So, this is a woman that I met at an event. We sat next to each other, we chatted a little bit. She sent me a follow up DM after the event. It's still in my request folder because I'm not going to open it. And if you're listening to this, which I know that you're not based on based on your DM, I know that you're not. So anyways, she sent me a DM that was like, "Hey Katrina, it was so great to meet you at today's event. Really love speaking with you. I'd love to be on your podcast." Basically. That was essentially what she said. Like it was so straight up that it turned me off because I was like, you just sent me this message to like, she didn't even pitch herself. Okay. She didn't even say, this is what I could bring to the episode. This is like what I would love to speak about with you. This is like what I'm working on. She didn't say any of that. Okay. So I obviously felt a little bit used and abused in that situation because I was like, no, like simply no. Um, And not even just because I don't have guests, because she actually doesn't have an online presence. So that's like another thing. If you don't have an active Instagram, LinkedIn online presence, that's a problem. And that's not going to help you in your visibility efforts. Why are you relying on everybody else to provide you with visibility for your business if you're not putting in the work to make yourself visible on these free Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, every social media platform ever? You have all of these free tools available to you to increase your visibility, but you're going to make it everybody else's responsibility first? I don't think so. So she had no online presence. She didn't follow me. She also didn't follow the show. So I don't even know that she like knows what the show's about. Okay. She's not following it. She only briefly met me. So, yeah, while she might know that I specialize in personal branding and PR, she certainly isn't like up to date on like the things I talk about and all of that. Right. She's not following me. And then, like, to just straight up ask, like, I was like, wow, take a girl out for dinner first. Like, the audacity these days for people to just like request things that should actually just be like paid for, or like are just not available to you, it's getting out of control. I've had people ask me for like content for free. I've had people like obviously just like tell me that they should be a guest on my podcast. Like it's just getting icky. And if I feel this way, my podcast sits in like the top 10 for 10% of podcasts. If I feel this way, there are top podcast hosts with their 1% podcast that feel even more icky because they get even more requests. They get even more like entitlement from people who think that their visibility is someone else's responsibility. So just know, like, if you're pitching anything, please approach the opposite party like a human. Okay. There is no need to be like, just, I don't know, asking for things. You wouldn't go up to a stranger on the street and ask them to give you money. I mean, I know some people do that, but like you wouldn't. The business owner, the highly qualified business owner listening to this podcast wouldn't do that. So why would you do it to like go on someone's podcast, right? Yeah. Oh, okay. So we've covered, let's just kind of recap what we've got so far. We went through the process. We talked about follow-ups, talked about some do's and don'ts. The last important thing to really consider when you're pitching top podcasts is your subject line. So this is something that I see a lot with people that are like working on their pitches for the very first time. They want to put a subject line that that like includes the word pitch or podcast guest. And don't because people immediately see that, they know what the email's about. They're probably not even going to give you a chance. The pitch kit has like 30 subject lines that I've sent before that have been successful that I want you to use as your inspiration. You can take that whole document, plug it into ChatGPT, and help it craft you subject lines, um, pitch drafts, all of that using my methodology. So it isn't so icky and it isn't so unsuccessful, because as soon as you put like podcast guest pitch or like pitch colon your name, like the podcast, the host does not care about that until they actually understand what content you might speak on, what makes you an authority, why you would be an interesting conversation. So that's just an important thing to be aware of too, because one of the reasons why you might be getting like so little responses is simply because your emails aren't even getting opened, right? And that's also why we safeguard it with this like initial email, then we do a voice note DM, right? Because that adds that personal connection. So maybe if someone did like still accidentally delete your email, or if it went to spam, they then know to like go look for it, because now you've piqued their interest. So they're like, oh, actually, like let me take a second look at that, right? So that's really what you want to start doing when you pitch top podcasts. But here's the thing, you guys. Podcasts are available to each and every single one of you, but if you don't understand how to pitch properly, that's the barrier. That is what is standing in between you and all of the juicy opportunities. So if you're looking to learn how to pitch and really start making podcast guesting a big part of your visibility strategy in 2026, you need to get into the Fame Ready Entrepreneur Program. Okay, I'm running a special promo right now for Black Friday, which is when you enroll in the Fame Ready Entrepreneur Program. It's my group program, gets you 12 months access to hot seat coaching calls, weekly PR opportunities. Actually just posted some really cool speaking gig applications in there for some events across the continent. When you are inside that program, you have access to all that stuff. But if you jump in before Black Friday, you can also get 1 month of private coaching with me. So what that looks like is every single weekday starting January 5th until the end of January, I will be checking in with you on a daily basis to move you that much closer towards your visibility goals. So maybe you are wanting to pitch yourself to more podcasts. We would decide what is the really big goal that you're working on that in 2026, but more specifically in Q1 in January. And every single day, we're going to voice note, we're going to message back and forth about how you can start to work towards those goals at one of the most pivotal times of year. Okay. January is when we can make all of our dreams come true. I really believe that. So if you love this episode, please follow me at Katrina Owens PR on Instagram. You can follow the podcast at Get Fame Ready. Please subscribe, review, leave me a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple or wherever else you listen to podcasts. You can watch this podcast on YouTube. All of the details about the pitch kit, the Fame Ready Entrepreneur Program, those resources I mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes. And I hope you all. Why is the ending so hard? Why am I like having trouble landing the plane here? Keep me posted, you guys. If you use any of the tips that I've provided in this podcast episode, send me a DM to let me know how they work for you. If you end up landing a top podcast episode, like a top 5%, 1%, 0.5% global podcast, oh my God, I'm dying. If you end up landing a significant podcast because of my tips, I want to know about it. So please make sure you include that in your review. Of course, I feel like I've earned your 5-star review if that's the kind of result you see from this content. But also send me a DM so I can celebrate with you. So that's all for me. I'll see y'all next week and have fun feeling famous. Okay, toodles.